Thanks for having me. The topic is, I added a little bit into it, Geointelligence, because I think it might be relevant to you guys as well. So, but I like patterns. Right? I like to look at patterns and in human behavior and so forth. So mathematics, did my undergrad degree in mathematics and geography at BSc, but I like geography more, landscapes and stuff like that. That's why I made my PhD in that field. Anyway, mathematics gives you a kind of a logical approach, which I don't have to actually convert it here. And you can model the patterns, but sometimes humans are funny, and you need to look at them visually, trying to find anomalies in their behavior, especially when you do the forensic side of it, so that you can actually assist the police in finding them guilty when they commit a crime. So this talk is about forensic applications of GIS, and I'm going to give you some real case examples that I worked on. And then I want to also do a bit of a talk on geointelligence, which is a kind of when you use it for investigation purposes itself, but you can't use it for court purposes. Right. So let's carry on. So the first part is going to be on forensic geography and GIS, and I'm going to give you examples, and then a little bit on geointelligence and also other examples. And all the examples that I'm going to give you are cases that I worked on and projects that I worked on. So it's local South African cases, and some of them were very high-profile cases in court, and others were just interesting research that I did with some police officers. Alright, so forensic geography and GIS. The forensic geoscience ranges from the macro level, such as reusing satellite imagery, remote sensing, and so forth. I'm going to show you, I just talked to Professor David here with the change detection and so on, where some of my colleagues applied it to look at illegal peat mining, then right down to the level of electron microscope, where you use sand grains and the chipping on the sand grains and so on, you know from where it was sampled or collected from. You can identify it as a thumbprint, so the soils are unique. The soil characteristics can change within 1 meter from where I'm standing now, and if I go there, it's different. So soils are like fingerprints, so you can use that for connecting poachers to poaching sites and so forth. So forensic geography is from macro scale right down to micro scale. And that's the realm that we work in. So that's the discipline where the geographer does research and gives expert witness in the crime. I was often involved as expert witnesses in crime, where I made some analysis and so on, and then I had to defend that in court against the defense. And it's a witness in crime, a legal dispute, or a case where anything is spatial. So as soon as space comes in, then we start playing the role. And that can be applied in both in civil cases, like a dispute of retail territory, where one retailer is impinging on the other retailer's territory. And welcome. And criminal cases, which was my area of involvement. And literature, there's lots of literature on it, very interesting examples on it, and some of them are quite mathematical. And we're looking at geophysics, natural geography, remote sensing, satellite imagery, and so forth. And GIS is basically the tool that you use to do this analysis. So GIS is like MS Excel or SAS, or MATLAB, stuff like that. So it's a tool, right? There is a science behind it. It's got their own science field, but it's used as a tool. So about 95% is application-wise, and 5% of the people that develop algorithms and stuff like that for the tool to be used. And it has a wide range of applications, from environmental impact assessments right through civil engineering, accessibility analysis for shops, routing of vehicles, and so on. Right. So We look at human and physical geography. Natural geographies, then we look at geomorphology, soil, sediments. One interesting case where they used it in Mallorca, here it's an island close to Spain, where they actually could use the geomorphology, the soils and the sediments to link a person who was stealing rare birds' eggs from cliffs. The grains that were embedded in the mountaineering route that he was using, the one could then fingerprint it and they could actually relate it back exactly where he actually stole those eggs. Remote sensing is then LiDAR images. You've got that example there of a drone doing underground mapping and so on, 3D and so forth, and that kind of stuff. So all these elements, all these tools and data collection devices and so on we use then as a forensic application trying to get the criminal behind. And then, as I said, spatial. So we're interested in points of interest, where the body was found, house, where the person stayed, shopping malls, where the incident took place, cell towers, drug selling points, banks, anything that can be mapped. And as I said, the GIS is a tool. So based on this, I'm going to give you some examples. The first example that I was involved with, it was my first case that I worked with the police, was in 1998. 1998, the murder, kidnap happened early January 1998, and the kidnap took place here at Signal Hill. And what at that time, the criminals themselves had, the suspects themselves had a cell phone, and then when they kidnapped the people, they took their cell phone and they started communicating with each other because they had now two vehicles. So the part of the gang was in the one vehicle, which they used themselves, and then the hijacked vehicle with the kidnapped people in there was the other one, and they needed to communicate with each other. So we could actually trace them, how they were moving about Cape Town. And the number here is the first call, second call, third call. And you see they were following each other closely, and then they got separated. There they're trying to regroup again, and that is the final one. And then in the meantime, they killed the guy, they dumped him over there. They wrapped the woman and killed her over here at the nearest strand, and towards the Wissenberg side, and then where the vehicle was dropped and burnt out and so forth. But we could then actually track them, how they were moving about Cape Town, and because we had the time of day, then the call was made. This was early January, 1st of January, at 2 o'clock in the morning, and time of death and so on. We could then start linking this together, and we could then say these guys were actually trying to communicate, and then the murder took place and so forth. Where the witness was staying, she said they saw them at this time of night, and we could correlate it with the time of calls and so forth. So we could then stitch the whole case together, and we mapped it. And this was the map that we used before, and we could then clearly, step by step, indicate the whole process of how the crime was committed and when they stopped and so forth. These guys, the two were killed by the police at the roadblock because they started shooting at the police. The other two members got lifelong prison sentences without parole. So that was now my first forensic case that I was involved with. And then the Taliep Petersen murder case in 2006, which was the one that I still think was my best one. We get good ones and bad ones. I also worked on the Ani Devani case, Shrin Devani case, but in the end, he was found not guilty, but it was also a very interesting case, and I still think the case could have gone the other way, but that's my own personal opinion. Coming back to the Taliep Petersen case, he was a very talented South African musician, was very much involved with his community and so forth. And he married Nashville Petersen, and somehow along the way, the whole thing went high wire, and she wanted to get rid of him. And we used cellular telephone data to reconstruct the events around it, the organization of the hit, and so forth. And we used the cell phone data. There were 2 failed attempts on the 14th and 15th of December 2006 because, funny enough, the criminals, the hitmen that they hired, their vehicle didn't want to start. So they couldn't get to the place to do the hit. He was very cross and so forth. And then, unfortunately, on the 16th of December, they got another guy in, and he managed to murder him. So the whole evidence was based on cellular telephone data. And what I needed to do is they had a state witness, and my job was to use the cell phone data without knowing what was going on, trying to establish the pattern and the communication between people, and they used it then to corroborate the state witness's account so that they then could find the people guilty, and which was actually a big success in this instance. One of the interesting things was when I worked through the cell phone data, remember I said I like patterns, so we look for patterns. And what was interesting is this guy was the state witness, this guy was the hitman, this was the in-between guy, the organizer, and this guy was actually a person that was at the murder scene that particular night. So when I worked through the cell phone data, looking at communication patterns between the various parties, you could see there was always a two-way communication between these two persons, two-way communication between them, and two-way communication between these two. This guy wasn't involved. There was no communication between these main figures. What was interesting is Taliep Petersen found the guy. He never found back. It was a one-sided communication. And that's what I say, you must look at patterns. And that was the clincher in the case. Because when I said that in court, that she initiated all the calls to the state witness, because he organized the hit in the end, it was always a one-way communication. And that was, when I said that, you could hear a pin drop in court. Right. The other one is also interesting is this is the house. Taliep Petersen was murdered over there on the first floor. They were already sleeping in separate bedrooms because of the deterioration of their relationship. And she was in this house, this part of the house, and he was in that part of the house. What was interesting is the closest tower, the reception was on the far side of the house. So you thought if that is the closest cell tower, then you should actually, this house should actually trigger the closest cell tower. But in this instance, it wasn't. It was consistent that the furthest part of the house was actually triggering the cell phone tower. So we picked up this pattern. So we needed to understand why we get this pattern of cell phone calls. So what we did is we got the engineers in who work on the cell phone, from the cell phone service providers, and they established that the building material of this house, this instance, actually made that the signals were further away. The reception was better on this side for the house, for this tower over there, and the reception for this side was for that tower. And so we could actually then, in the end, because we had the luck that the house was on the border of two cells, we could actually then recreate the movement inside the house based on the cell phone usage. And that's how we broke her alibi, because she said to the police she was sleeping and she had medication, she was asleep, the people came into the house and woke her up. But based on her cell phone records, she was actually moving about. She was wide awake and talking to the people, especially to this guy. So we could then actually recreate her, to a certain extent, the movement inside the house. We've got the bottom floor, the ground floor as well, and we could then establish how she was moving about the house. If that was because we had the luck on the outside. If the house was slap bang in the middle of a cell, we wouldn't have been able to. But just because we were lucky in this instance, that the house is on the border between two cells, we could actually be able to. Right, then we started working on the timeline. So again, the pattern. This was the failed attempt on the 15th of December. From there to there, 16th December, and then 17th. And this is the run-up to the murder on 16th December 2006. And you can see we made a pattern of calls, and then suddenly here, it's quiet. That's when the murder took place. So the people were inside the house, there was no need to use a cell phone, the guy was shot. Then thereafter, they left, scattered, there were a few talks over there, and then one or two scattered. So you could clearly see the build-up of the people getting to the place, the organization, checking if it's been done. They're in the house. He got killed at 11:30 at night, close to midnight, and the whole thing dissipated because the work was done. So we could then look at this whole run-up pattern. And you can see there was nervous. People want to see whether it's going to work. So this was also part of evidence report that we did. We could show the communication, the intensity that was happening. This was the failed attempt. You could see she was talking to Marelise Petersen was talking to the state business, and then this other guy was organizing the new hitman, and he came into the picture. And then we represented it in 3D. So the bottom part is the coordinates, x, y, latitude, longitude, and upwards it was time. Right? The oldest time at the bottom. So if you go up, the time gets younger, and you could see how they were organizing each other, how they were moving about Cape Town, getting closer and closer to the house. The blue line was the hitman, and he got close into the house. The red line was Taliep Petersen, jumping between the two towers, and the black line, straight line that goes through there, was actually the location of the house. So each point here is the cell tower location. So you could see how the people were moving about. The one guy was over here, Hassan and Jerry. They were talking to each other. There was he, and there was the other guy. That's the link between them in time and space. And you could see how they were moving about, getting closer to the house, and some of the other guys were just in the vicinity where the murder took place. And we also put in each link, we numbered them sequentially, in sequential order in terms of time. And we had a spreadsheet where we could then say at number 56, the link between the two people were Njeri and Hassan. Njeri was the Grassy Park, town area, a suburb in Cape Town, and the other one is Symphony Secondary, which was actually very close to the house. And we could then build this whole thing together, and we could see the pattern coming up. And you can clearly see the run-up to the murder. And that was the last call, and then an hour and a half later. And that was the kind of evidence that we put into court. And so we could build this whole case just based on cellular telephone usage between these various parties. Right, the other one was a stock theft in close to Piketberg in the Western Cape. There was the crime scene, but we were looking at rural areas, and one of the things in rural areas is that your reception areas can be very big. If you look at this cell, there's a cell tower, and the diameter is about 40 kilometers. So the guy, you can say the guy was in the area, but yeah, but anywhere in 40 kilometers. Radius, 20 kilometer radius. So what we looked here, again, pattern. They were here in Taliep, and if they don't go, and this was the night when they were arrested, you can see them moving about Cape Town, Khayelitsha, which was Plain, all those areas. And then they started driving through to commit the crime. And that gives a pattern. So it's a concentration of movement, and then suddenly they drive around. And we looked at the cell phone data and say, if they don't go on to do stock there, they just keep them to this area because that's concentration. So what we did is to see whether on other incidences in the area there, we know when the ship was stolen, we have the time of the date and so forth. We have a similar pattern from these guys, if they were the suspects, that we could see whether they are actually involved in the other incidents. And if you look at the next one, which was before the arrest, 15 days before, you can clearly see the pattern. Concentration over there, drive around, steal the ship. Some of the guys went this way, some of the guys went that way. So we have a similar pattern. The other days in between, just concentrated around this area. When these stock theft incidents took place, they moved out back. This loop, driving around, coming back to Cape Town. So we could then actually link them to 3 other stock theft cases before the one that they were arrested, based on the pattern of cell tower usage. The next one is illegal peat mining. We used the change detection. You could see no disturbance, that's a wetland, in 1991. You could start seeing the damage in 2002, 2006, and 2010. And you can then compare these images with each other and you can work out the area that was impacted by the illegal mining activities, and they used that in court to get these guys guilty. And that was done by the Green Scorpions from the Department of Environmental Affairs. Right, geographic profiling. You're looking at trying to figure out where a serial killer or a serial rapist resides or operates from, based on the locations of incidents. And so we want to look at serial murder, serial rape, serial arson. So it's done by an individual that repeats his criminal activities, even serial break-ins and so forth. And we try to see whether we can actually narrow down the area where the police have to search for the individual that they are interested in. So it's based on the hunting pattern of the offender. It's not random. We're using the encounter sites like where the murders were, we found the bodies, the rape sites, body dump sites, and so forth. And we use all these locations, running an algorithm on it, trying to figure out from which area it is operated from. And we look at environmental criminology, such as routine activity theory. The criminal's path around the environment intersects with the path of the target, and if they intersect, the possibility of crime can happen. Sometimes it doesn't. And what's interesting is that the offender has a mental map of the area that he operates in. The first case that we tested on was the Remapan serial killer. The program was developed by a Canadian police officer. He's now at Texas University as a professor there. And what this is, you can see this is a trend surface, and we call it journey to crime surface, and also what they call the other explanation they give it, jeopardy surface. So we look at all the incidents that were spread around here, and the thing is, if you criminals tend to be lazy, so they don't want to go far to commit the crime, so we get a concentration, kind of hotspot. And most of the incidents with regards to the Remapan serial killer happened from this area here, and the secondary one was over there. teardrop. And this area here is the highest probability that you will find. And what you do is, once you narrow down the area, this is Roodepoort over there, this is Terfontein, so it's quite a distance. So what we're trying to do is looking for the guy in this particular area here, than trying to find him over all of Johannesburg. So that is what we're trying to do. And if you look at this as a 10% area, the likelihood of finding him is 10% here, and even in the top 1%, there was his two houses. So he was actually within the top 1%, 99% likelihood that you will find him, that you will stay in this particular area. So what you can do is now, with the psychological profile and so forth, you can then start looking for the individual within these few steep blocks rather than looking at 100 square kilometers. The other example was mine dump serial killer. I ran the profile for the police. He was already arrested at that time. They wanted there was a demo for the police to show them how good the model works. So I ran the model and I said to him, at the top 3% of the hunting area, the guy, there's a possibility because there's no houses and things like that, it's open veld and mine dumps, that the possibility is that the guy could be a migrant sleeper and he could sleep under a bridge, and that's actually where the police are. So it's a logical place. We start looking for logical places where people can sleep. They sleep on the bridges or bushes and stuff like that. So I could then say, these are possible spaces, and one of them was under the bridge, and that's where the police actually arrested. So this is a typical classical pattern, donut pattern, very little activity close by, and most of these were unfortunately children that we didn't care about the sexes, but they were found there in that area. Most of them were found in this. These are all mine dumps, old, unused mine dumps. Then a Norwood serial rapist. He was a police officer. It was the police barracks, and that was his parents' house. He had 2 anchor points. Because both of them were equally important to him, his work and his parents, but he was the workspace is more prominent. He even actually jumped over the back of the fence of the police barrack and acted in next door. The often was very close, it was very closely packed. And you could then bet that this was the highest probability that it was around there, then his parents' place. The last one is also a serial rapist. He was a trapper. Before he lured the people, saying, the woman is saying, okay, I've worked for this person, and the person wants somebody to do work, a job office, and he takes him to the decoy house because it's all built up area here, and it's up veld there, and then you actually so we could then use that decoy house as a link, because that's was actually, then we found that he was actually bringing the people to that particular area, and we could then and they were actually lying down and saw this guy coming with a victim, and then they arrested him. Then the other interesting case that I was involved with, the great post-bank cyber robbery. And if you remember that in January 2012, there was this whole hoo-ha in the media about 42 million rand that went missing. And this was the setup. The kingpin organizing it was in Centurion here close to Pretoria. The other members of the gang were in Welkom in the Free State, and the Post Bank IT center, IT department, where they actually run the whole databases and everything for the bank, was situated in Bloemfontein. So what they did is they found a guy that matched the profile that they were looking for, and they actually bribed him, coerced him into the theft. And this is the whole setup. The kingpin was sticking around Pretoria Centurion. the other guys from Welcome was having contact with the kingpin, and these guys actually worked with the guy in Bloemfontein. You can see they're traveling from Welcome to Bloemfontein, back to Welcome, to Pretoria, then they're actually at Shell Ultra, very close to Midrand, Samrand. This is Welcome, staying out. This big communication over here was the establishment of the fake bank accounts. And what they did is that each bank account had a 500,000 Rand withdrawal limit, $500,000. They created false debit cards, and then they created all these accounts. Midnight on the 31st of December, they shifted the money into these false accounts. They had the runners organized. I'll show you just now. They were withdrawing money from ATMs early morning hours everywhere. And they even had video footage of an old lady that they used standing with a plastic bag, just shoveling the money into a plastic bag as it came out of the ATM with a $500,000 withdrawal limit. So that's how they actually, the police only found 3 million back. So 39 million. Still don't know where it is. I followed one of the main guys based on their cell phone activity into the city, and I said to the police, to the Hawks, the chances is maybe that the money is stashed somewhere in the city. And they said, yeah, no, they agree, but they don't have any jurisdiction in the city. Right, so that was the setup. This was the execution. So this guy put the money out. There's no more communication between him and the other part of the gang. And these guys were moving about Welcome and surrounding areas. They collected the money. You can see they were right up to Bethlehem, drawing money from the ATM, collecting money from the runners, taking the money to Shell Ultra City, handed it over, and drove back. This guy the kingpin was organizing his own runners in Victoria and surrounds, and was actually monitoring them and so on. And they used the classical pyramid scheme. The runners got a cut, and these guys that were collecting the money, they got their cut, and the kingpin got the most of the money. And that's how we could then actually reconstruct this whole movement about when they communicated, how they communicated, where did they move about. There's one guy here, this blue line here, I could actually track. The bank gave me the ATMs, the compromised ATMs and the withdrawal times. I could link it to the cell phone usage time, and I could actually say, okay, the guy was in Kroonstad. At that time, he used the cell phone tower just about a minute after he got the money out of the ATM. And so he moved about. So he was phoning in every time. So I've got the money, got the money, got the money. So as he was moving from ATM to ATM, he was moving from cell tower to cell tower, and I actually could link times together and illustrate that he was the guy that was actually taking the money from the ATMs and that. Alright, Geointelligence. Alright, so from Wikipedia, just to make it an easy explanation, is about human activity on Earth, as we saw on the examples that I gave before, and also imagery and geospatial information. So in this instance, it's not forensic. This is where you do investigations, or you try to understand what's going on. It's also applied in the military. You're looking at your red and blue forces and so forth, and trying to figure out what's the enemy going to do and so forth, trying to find the ammunition dumps and storage spaces and so forth. So geointelligence is actually wide, but I only apply to my interest is actually also again in crime. And the first one that I want to talk about is movements and anchor points of a gang member. He was actually the head of the Little Americans in Cape Town, and you could see I was looking at his daytime pattern and his nighttime pattern, and you could clearly see there's anchor point over here during the day. That was what he did is he had a front, a business, used it as a truck. They want to appear like a normal guy that goes about his business, he repairs cars and so forth. And then in the evening, he goes home, he stayed over here, and he had some nightclub that he liked so much and so forth. He tried to even pay his school, the children's school fees, check what his expensive cars on hire purchase, so he tried to not to draw suspicion to him. So we tried to be as normal person as possible, and we were interested in his movements. These are the roads, possible roads that he could take. The highest frequency was over there from his garden center that was on the Cape Flats. That was his main route. This other one was over here because his wife had a business there. His brother was staying there on the way to work. And this is his main activity space during the day. And there, it's a nightclub. That's during the night. And that was his point where he gave the drugs to his runners and they put them down and sell the drugs. And also, again, at night time, that was his main action because that's his home and that's his work, and also the usage of the roads in that area. What we did is we looked at how he moved from one cell tower to another based on his cell phone records, and we tried to snap it to the closest road. And that's how we could then actually establish the road usage between the consecutive calls. And that was the other suspect. He was a rich whitey with a drug problem, and he worked for the gang. He liked firearms very much, so he was their armorer. So when they had to do a hit or something like that, he provided the guns, they did the hit, and he take the guns away and disposes of them. He was the armorer, and in exchange he could get his drugs for free. And he was staying there at Plattekloof, and Plattekloof is a upmarket area in Cape Town, and you could see him coming down the N1, Afvoortrekker Road. There's the N1 coming down into town, and that is how he moved about. You could see clearly the congregation point. He always went to the business that the guy had, and also in the night time he went to that particular night. But what's interesting, because of his social status, he also was moving freely in the other upmarket areas in Cape Town. So he was their front end in terms of the drugs into those areas, because we could fit in and so on. So that is why we could then actually build up. But he was also fairly comfortable in this area because of his connections to the gang. And if you look at this, is now his territory, and if you look here, the Scampsvale and those upmarket areas of Cape Town here, Clifton and so forth, if you look at the gang leader, who was a colored guy, go back, you could see the guy wasn't moving into that area. He didn't feel comfortable. Patterns, I like patterns. And that's also what we could do in the case. We got actually free this gang leader, but a year later, unrelated to this incident, somebody shot him. So we looked at his cell phone usage. We could see these are the anchor points. Those are the 1, 2, 3, 4 cell towers that he used the most. This was where his business was. And you could see early morning, and then there's a dip in lunchtime. So we were interested. We were interested. Why does he have a dip in lunchtime? And then that was where the nightclub was from. He operated from. His drug empire running from there. You could clearly see late evening usage. This was the one that we were interested in. This was 1 o'clock. You can see the spike. You can see the dip. And that was in Panther Park. And Panther Park, the guy, he was a notorious Nigerian who was a wholesaler in terms of drugs. So this guy always went in the afternoon, during lunchtime, get the drugs. In the evening, he goes to his nightclub, where he then pushes it out into his So we could then stitch it all together. This is early morning at his house, and early evening before he went. Came back home, said, "Hello, Lovey, doing fine." Then he went to the nightclub, he's got his girlfriend there, the naughty guy. So we can then reconstruct it from this. As I said, these are the patterns that we are interested in. And this is an anomaly because it's consistent. Dip of around lunchtime, there's a consistent peak over lunchtime, and that's why you could actually put the two together. So that is what we're interested in. You can't take that to court, but it will help you with your investigations. You can then, trying to figure out these movements, you can start doing surveillance and all that kind of stuff based on historical data. This is 6 months of cell phone usage shown in these few graphs. So we can clearly establish the patterns, and then we can say, around lunchtime, look at these areas here. You have a surveillance team out there, here, that can report to each other. Later in the night, you can move the surveillance team over there, so you can do surveillance management. Based on the intelligence that you got. Alright, so the other one that we were looking at is vulnerable communities. Now, here are rhino poaching and so forth is now much in the media, and we wanted to look at communities at risk. Not that they are involved in poaching, but they might be involved in poaching. And if we can find out what are the shortcomings in those communities, maybe we can do interventions like uplifting the community work, trying to improve job opportunities, bringing in stability into those areas and so forth, so that the people don't get coerced into poaching and so forth. And we looked at all the communities within a 20-kilometer range from all the nature reserves in South Africa, with the emphasis on those that have rhinos for this particular exercise. And we looked at employment status, income, education, and all that kind of stuff, and worked out a kind of a heuristic risk levels. And that was the end of the result that we did. That's how it was. You could see the nature reserves in KZN, the big rhino population, the park, and so forth, and you could see based on the socio-economic circumstances, job opportunities, and so forth, that these rural communities are at risk of being coerced into poaching. And we got corroborating evidence from the Mozambican side that that's actually what's actually happening in the Mozambique criminal syndicates that go from the Mozambican side into the Kruger to do the rhino poaching. They use poor people from the villages and say, all right, go and steal a rhino. It's not big. It's not a very hard job. We give you a rhino horn is $74,000 a kilogram. We give you $1,000. Easy money in inverted commas. Not so more anymore because it is actually the law enforcement are getting actually a hold on this whole thing. But it is a low risk crime, actually, in terms of human life and so forth. So it's actually quite attractive for these people that actually don't have anything. They don't have anything to lose. They live in poor conditions and so forth. It's actually very attractive to coerce them into part of So what we're trying to do is identify those communities at risk and then see whether there are any interventions that can be done to improve their livelihoods and so forth, so that they're not going to be enticed to go into poaching. And a similar, that is now concentrating on the area, and you can look here at security of income and tenure and so forth, and you can see tenure. Those people don't own their own land. You know, we have this issue about land nowadays. There's clearly, these are all communal land owners, so they don't have tenure security. So the reason for, if you give tenure security to people, giving their title deeds and so on, the chances that the person will commit a crime is lower because he's afraid of losing his property. So it's kind of an incentive. So that whole land debate is actually very important, even though people scream like that. It is actually important to give security of tenure, having land ownership. Because it's also a deterrent of crime. He has then the means, or she has the means, to use the property to do some other stuff. To lend money, to borrow money to start up a business or whatever. So it's very important. It's much more wider than what people think and scream about at the moment. The politicians, their homes and so on. Right, the last one is a similar exercise that we did. We got all these variables based on studies done in Somalia about the piracy in Somalia, what happened there, and so on. And then we used the same in trying to figure out which communities in South Africa could be at risk of being coerced into piracy in coastal regions and so forth. And you can see this area here, it's the highest risk because most of the fishers there have deep sea capabilities. They've got boats that can go deep sea fishing and so forth. So they know how to navigate into the shipping lanes and be able to commit piracy. So that is how we worked it out. Also, again, we did some heuristic weighting of variables and so on to work out the overall risk. And despite all that, good people, South Africa is still a beautiful country. Thank you very much.